could see that, let's say that you have an older suburban neighborhood that's kind of, they're trying to actually boost their value because they're having to compete with all the new, suburban growth out there. So maybe what they will do is they will actually bring in some sort of fleet like this or an autonomous shuttle, mobility as a way to just, add more amenities. The second thing that, actually, I'm glad you asked that question, and it's going to get into the next example. But what you may see is that this transportation as a service is something that becomes popular with social service providers who now use volunteers to do share a ride or something that might be labor intensive or word of mouth or something. But all of a sudden, let's say you have a population, maybe there's an Indian tribe or single mothers in a certain neighborhood, there's all a church even. All of a sudden they have access of a way to add technology to the services they've always given. Maybe they don't want to use technology, that's fine, but this is just an example of how you're going to have all these different types of organizations adopting a new platform to match riders with drivers with trips. So those are two things. And I want to show you actually this example is from Needles, California, which is a teeny tiny, very low income neighborhood that sits right where California and Nevada and Arizona all come together. And Victor Valley Transit Association Authority is the transit provider. They're one of the most innovative transit providers serving the most rural, the most poor populations in this country. But they're just really clever. And so what they did is they worked with Enterprise Car Share to have a sedan and a minivan available to this small community. And so what they did is they set it up at the local credit union. Now, things like groceries are 10 miles away. So one of the goals was access to fresh food. Not mobility, not economic development, but food. And I just wanted to give you all a bunch of different examples. And they leveraged their existing partnerships. And this car share program covers 70% of their costs, which is almost unheard of with transit or any type of transportation. So VVTA only has to provide 30% of the funding, and most of that is to pay for the cost of signing up. So if somebody signs up for the program, it's usually $50, and VVTA covers that. And what they're finding is that on the weekends, 4 families will go in together with the minivan to all go and get groceries. And so it becomes kind of a social thing as well. But I just thought, this is not just an urban thing. And again, setting that goal was really important. So they track, people going to the grocery store. And a lot of it's word of mouth because it's such a small, intimate community that they can go in and just start talking to people sitting on their front porch or people who are just bringing the minivan back. Those, by the way, are called intercept surveys. And it's a great way to collect data. It's resource intensive, but apparently the quality of data is the best if you meet people where they are. So somebody driving up, dropping off the minivan, you intercept them right there. It's like, how was the ride? What sort of activities did you do? How many people went? You can collect that kind of data. And we're getting towards the end here. I know I've been talking a lot. So we were talking about e-commerce, and so the rise in e-commerce is changing logistics rapidly. Amazon, of course, they used to have 2-day prime delivery. Now they've got it down to 1. Now they want 30 minutes by drone delivery. That's the goal. In addition to Bezos wanting to go to Mars, they want to get you anything you want to order in 30 minutes or less. And just think about that for just 1 minute of all the wacky stuff you order on Amazon being within 30 minutes of your house. And what that means for the built landscape. It means lots of warehouses everywhere. And in fact, that's why they bought Whole Foods, to put these lockers in. The other thing is Amazon is going out and buying entire dead malls, which for many communities is kind of tragic because there have been plans on the books that that's going to be their new town center, some of this suburban retrofit, because it's such a big piece of property and they've got an owner who's willing to play and make it something better. And instead, Amazon comes in, There aren't that many jobs because these warehouses are automated like you'd never believe. But think about living next to that mall where there's going to be packages going in and out constantly. Amazon wants it to be drones. And even if it's not drones, it's still vans and things like that. Or a combination like this one, which is a package delivery truck with 2 drones on the top. So what the driver does is she pops up 2 packages and they go off and the driver delivers 1. So all of a sudden that one stop is 3. So it's a little out there, mind-blowing. But then again, let's think about a lot of our suburban and exurban and rural places that are very, very spread out. It actually may help be a good idea and less of an environmental footprint, more efficient, faster. Because right now, a lot of these drones, the biggest need is health and getting people medicine or post-disaster. And they are turning out to be like the mechanical heroes who are able to go out there and find people on their roofs and do the surveys and get the equipment and get the supplies. So even though I'm a skeptic, I also understand that there are a lot of use cases that are vitally important, and that actually lowering the footprint of how we deliver things to houses might actually be a good goal. I think my biggest hesitance is like we are genetically wired to kind of swat at things buzzing around us, and like this is just going to be constant buzzing. And I really do cherish my pedestrian environment, and like I like to go out and hear nature and stuff like this, not mechanical mosquitoes. And then finally, autonomous, driverless, automated. There's a lot of different types of terms used to talk about this. It does seem like automated shuttles, which is this little boxy thing right here, which by the way is 3D printed. It's plastic, it's 3D printed. And no, it's capped at 20 miles an hour. So, and it's built so that when it wears out, you just put it back in the thresher, and it takes it into these little micro things, and it gets put into the 3D printer again and spits a new one out. So they wanted cradle to cradle, I believe is the technology manufacturing term. Also trucks, freight, big long haul trucks seem to be a very successful use case for this. And a lot of it's called platooning, where you'll have, the first truck will have a driver, but they'll be wired almost like, what are those Thomas the Train engines that have little magnets that like, were all over my house at one time. And so like they can go along and one driver now can drive 3 or 4 different trucks. And because they're so closely, it's not like they're clogging the highway, or maybe they're clogging the highway, but just a little bit closer together. So those are the 2 things that seem to be breaking out as the most applicable. And as far as testing goes, they're on a good track.
But that only works on freeways.
Yes, exactly.
Even then, big truck highways are a mess to get around.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of the signs on the highway saying, trucks, keep out of the left lane, it'll be cars, keep out of the right lane, because it'll be, or the second to the right, because then you've got to have people getting on and off. Or maybe the very left-hand lane, what you'll have is the middle of every single lane will be throughput, and the edges will be on and off in the economic activity. So again, we were talking about how is infrastructure going to change. Automated cars, there's 3 different models. Everybody owns their own, like we have now. Ride hailing, where you summon one from an Uber, or the share, like a car share model. Those are 3 different models for individual cars. That one's a little more messy for a lot of different reasons. And then the delivery bots. So we talked about the air drones. There's also these sidewalk drones. And my favorite is, this one has a face painted on it because the first trial, they found people were going out and beating them up with baseball bats. And there is such a thing, there's a phenomenon called robot bullying. And so you'll have people on these test tracks who, if an autonomous car is coming, just jump in front to make it stop. Do it several times and nothing ever happens. And so robot bullying is a thing. So a little bit about the details. These are different ways that they're being tested. There are about 100 trials, pilots underway right now, and a couple of them are actually into the full service, like where their riders are being, it's like transit. So it could be educational, it could be healthcare, employment centers, entertainment districts, retail and restaurant districts is a big one. Parking shuttles are emerging as a really good first use case. Again, nobody wants to spend $10 to $50 million on a garage anymore. Or if they, we have a big parking practice, and so we actually do have a couple of clients who want the $10 to $50 million garage because they're flush with cash somehow, and they have an immediate parking need. And it's like, get me this as fast as you can. We have other clients who are like, we don't think that there's going to be the same demand in 10 or 15 years, so we want you to build us an adaptable garage. And Elaine was showing me last night in downtown Boise, there are parking garages that have level floors. Because if you just have all the slanted floors, you can't convert it to anything else. Even though I did hear in Michigan, there was a health club that set up shop within an abandoned parking garage, and they use it as a running track for people running up 4 floors. It's like, that's clever. Never say never. And then residential developments. These are actually popular in Florida. And one of the first was Babcock Ranch. They not only had a shuttle inside, but they had an autonomous school bus. And when the feds found out about that, they shut it off immediately. It's like, who would put their kid on? But apparently, people do. And then there's different sorts of times. And these are just transit terms. So you could have anything from like your typical bus route that's fixed route, fixed schedule. It goes on this path and it stops at these stops at this time, to the all-you-can-eat version where it will go anywhere, anytime, on any street. And then there's shades in between. And so I think cities and communities and campuses have to just be aware of these different configurations when the time comes, if it's what you want.
So, Lisa, how many people an hour can they reasonably move?
So,
I mean,
right.
you're calling them microtransit, and I think one of the distinctions that people need to make is they're going to serve these real sort of discrete needs, but they're not going to serve big needs, right?
Well, look, this one is, I'll get to that, 2 slides.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm asking.
And the answer is it depends. So designing a shuttle, there's about 5 different parts. There's first the feasibility, and believe it or not, a lot of companies say no 9 times out of 10 because the sponsor hasn't come through with a viable need. And they don't want to run empty shuttles because it's still a cost, and it's also bad for their reputation, quite frankly. Finance and funding, you've got to figure that out. How long your pilot's going to be, what your boundaries are going to be, and then the technical requirements. And that's where the real technical stuff comes in. And that's safety, data, privacy. That's probably 75% of your trial. And that's probably where you're going to be calling in data scientists, a university partner. That part is really, really in the weeds. So to answer your question, so you've got an operational design domain, and so that really looks at what kind of street, is it going to be low speed, is it going to be dedicated? Frankly, I think that we have not seen the worst case scenario yet with a big cyber attack where maybe you make 2 cars run into each other, or 2 shuttles, or 2 buses. It was in Fast and Furious 8, if there's any Fast and Furious, where Charlize Theron is the villain, and she's in Los Angeles, and there's a bunch of cars with self-park technology, and she looks at her co-villain, and she's like, make it rain. And all of a sudden, all the cars fly off of parking decks onto the unsuspecting public below. So it's already happened. You know, somebody's already filmed that. But if that were to happen in real life, we've already had fatalities that set the program back, but something with multiple casualties, you're just going to see an entire rethinking of where these things could and should run. And quite frankly, it could be where it's in a segregated lane, it's simple, but it serves a lot of people, like a bus rapid transit. You've got to go to that length. The other reason you might need it is because in addition to cyber hackers, like Wi-Fi goes down. And if you're in transit, you want to have redundant systems, and so maybe you embed those in the right of way, or you have just these different systems. San Francisco, their transit agency actually had a cyber hack that you probably didn't hear about because they had already thought worst case scenario, and they actually run a dual system that's identical. So when the hackers came to one and asked for like $1 billion Bitcoin or whatever, they're like, ha ha, show off. And they just unplugged it, and they plugged the identical in, and there was like 1 minute of downtime. So redundant systems are going to, no, that's not cheap.
Well, that was San Francisco. They planned ahead because they're in San Jose territory.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever heard of white hat hackers? It's basically where you hire somebody to hack you, but they're not a bad guy, they're a good guy, and they find the vulnerabilities in your system. We should have that for transit. So to answer your question, Elaine, this is in Arlington, Texas. They didn't have a transit system at all, so they thought they would be actually a first. This would be their transit. And so what they wanted to do was to move from private to public roads, because one of the things they wanted to do was move large amounts of people from a stadium that you see in the background. So I think it was the baseball team there. So whether or not they can deliver a lot of people, they have to have a lot of these different vehicles. These vehicles now are about $300,000 a pop, which they're in testing phases, and plastic 3D printing costs a lot of money. I think they're the first prototypes, so they're just expensive by design. But you've got to think about how many people you want to move at 20 miles per hour. Do you need 10? Do you need 20?
So I guess I'm asking, it seems like there would be a place for these, but then the high capacity routes would be fed by these, maybe.
Right.
You're still going to need some high capacity stuff. Is that fair
Yes,
to say?
I think that's fair to say. And in fact, I think that the autonomous part of it will be what a lot of areas of the country need to make buses sexy again. And because the design will be better, it'll be savvy, they'll probably add Wi-Fi and all these other things. It'll be clean because they're electric. So I do have some hope that actually with the bus rapid transit and things that mimic light rail, so all of a sudden instead of having to pay $3 billion for a light rail system, you can use some of your existing right of way. It's not going to be cheap to build a segregated lane. We know that now from BRT, but it's way less than 100 million, 300 million, $1 billion that people are now having to pay for some of these larger projects. And I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but so I thought this was interesting. I saw this today. So in Arlington, Texas, people loved it, right? Buffalo, New York, people loved it until they tried it. And they got off of this 3 days ago. And they're like, no, we're less thrilled with it. At first we were like, this is great, it's going to be easy, but they stop and start. They go really slowly. Maybe people thought they were going to get an exciting ride. It's not. Maybe the safety operator was grouchy, I don't know, but they came off of it kind of doubting the technology. And so I think what I'd like to do is kind of end this up with, yes, it can solve a lot of problems, where you can have expanded mobility, the ability to lower tailpipe emissions, feeders to transit, and even transit. Can they be economic catalysts? This is one of my biggest hopes, and the potential to lower costs. But they've created as many problems as they solve, even different problems. And so there's things like the privatizing your own personal data, which, granted, we do it every time we log into Facebook. But it's with public entities now, so I think the stakes are higher. The cyber security, lack of consumer trust is already out there. I think I fear that for automated cars, we're just going to want the auto ownership model, which, if we just swap out drivers for cars without drivers, we may save a little bit of space, but we're still going to have to deal with a lot of stuff bearing down on our infrastructure. Biased algorithms. So a lot of machine learning is coming into play, and there have been studies that show unless you have a diversity of coders and a diversity of databases, you start to actually have machine learning that has the same biases or even worse biases. So if you live in a community where a lot of, let's say, car theft is by a certain demographic age, and that gets built into, it's no better than humans. So I think that's a real, luckily people are paying attention to this. You have federal and state preemption. Because these technology companies have so much money, they're going to the federal and state houses and they're like, can you tell these pesky local governments that we can't have a patchwork of regulation and get off our backs? So what you're seeing is a lot of legislation where local governments just don't have any control, or very minor control. And that's one thing to watch. I'm not sure where Idaho is in the preemption.
TNCs and short-term rentals are both preempted.
Right. So there's that.
And plastic bags, we can't ban plastic bags. We can't raise our minimum wage. Anyway.
Straws. And then the cost of mass electrification. And there's two things here. Number one, notice that I said there's no tailpipe emissions. That electricity's got to come from somewhere. In a lot of places that's coal. Or, there's greenhouse gases. It's not as clean as people think. But also the cost of mass electrification. So I think there's going to be a huge uptick in electrification of our mobility fleets. And putting in maybe 3 or 5 charging stations is, something. Once you start putting in 20 and 50, you've got to start putting in transformers. It's almost like you're building an electric utility in a parking garage. And I think that's underappreciated. But it could get utility companies to become your best mobility partner in ways they have not before, which brings in more opportunities for funding and partnerships and things like that. So,
on that front, have you heard of any places where they're actually utilizing this to be a sub or a distribution station for the utility?
So that company I showed you about the car share, the amenity car share, that's going to be their business model. Like they're going to do cars on the side in about 5 years, but their big money's going to come from the electrification. And then the last thing I want to talk about, it's not all technology. I know there's been experimentation here with complete streets and better, yes?
I showed on your last slide the problems they create.
Oh.
Preemption aside, what do you recommend when somebody's putting together a pilot to try to address some of these problems? I mean, I understand broadly write it into your contract, but do you have anything more specific than?
I think it's not like every technology company is going to come in with 100% of awful motives. I think that what you do is set a placemat, and it's like we know things can go right and we know things can go wrong, and we want to hear your views on what you've been doing to address these and how we can do it better. A good example is with a lot of these small cell networks. So everybody's heard of 5G, right? And a lot of that's like big cable underground. Small cells, first and foremost, aren't all that small. They're like the size of refrigerator boxes. But it's what's needed for what's called the Internet of Things. So your phone can talk to your car, can talk to the trash can, and maybe your dog, I don't know. But like everything's going to talk to each other. And that takes a really robust network of like lower gigahertz cells. And so there's some states that are preempting your ability to control refrigerator-sized boxes on poles and in the public rights-of-way. So I know at the American Planning Association, we're actually trying to get in with the providers and talk about things that are more aesthetic. So I think there is a design role. So anybody here who's a planner, maybe what we can start doing is talking about design options so that they don't just come in and, chunk up our road. And in Europe, they have, this is awesome, they've started putting them in manhole covers. They're now like small cell networks.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I'm not quite sure how they work. Or surface. So And a lot of it is because with the manhole covers now, it's not just to go into the sewer, but like they have all their smart city
Yeah.
stuff like underneath, so they can go down there and fix a wire or something. So I think that's sort of where we need to start taking some of these conversations, is getting ahead of it, and it's like, this could be a problem, and it's like, how do we stop it from being a problem, and who do we have to talk to, and who are our partners in this? So maybe ULI would be really great, you know, to start talking about. And this is not big city stuff. This is older downtowns. Any planner who's ever worked on a cell tower permit knows it's a nightmare. This is that nightmare, maybe a little bit smaller package, but times 10,000. So I just think that there's, you know, thinking about things ahead of time and then figuring out design partners might be the best way. Yes.
I have just a comment about when you were talking about trucking and
Yes.
autonomous vehicles. I think the company I work for, HDR Engineering,
Okay, right.
we're doing a lot with electric
Yep.
vehicles that are trucks. And the first step on a huge pilot that they're doing, basically from the Mexican border all the way up to Canada,
Okay.
is working with utilities to find out where they're going to do these charging stations. So
Right.
that's the first step, that they're not even talking about the design of the actual vehicle. It's
Right.
where are they going to stop and charge?
Wow.
And so it's already in the works. I mean, it's
Cracker Barrel.
well, I mean, it's pretty amazing, you know. I mean, you think about where gas stations are now, that's where people used to stop. Do you take that infrastructure and then start to put the charging? And
Right.
anyway, I mean, it's already happening. We're in the
Right.
midst of a huge pilot with the
Good. I'm glad you,
utility partners.
So local partner here. You don't have to go to Florida. Yes.
I wanted to mention something about just how when you're planning on putting all that technology, so, and you know, as it upgrades over time and natural disasters, how do we, you know, plan for that? One of the things I've learned about is how Japan has their, you know, constant earthquakes. They put all of their utilities into those earthquake tunnels, like 100, at least 100 feet underground. It's basically a tunnel that goes all around Tokyo,
Wow.
around most of the major cities. And they've been working on it for almost 20 years, I believe.
Wow.
And all the important cables, it's basically reinforced, so a 10 scale, all their power, all their internet, all their, you know, utilities are basically there. So
Wow.
it's just something that was very expensive when you put it into place, but they said when the 2011 earthquake and tsunami happened, they were able to keep things functioning most of the time.
Wow. That's a good story.
Quick comment. I'd like to go back to your conversation about, you know, where the charging stations will be happening for all these freight vehicles that are out there. My wife and I were driving to Southern California, and we were traveling to Utah, and I had never stopped in Beaver, Utah in my entire life. But even though I was, you know, raised in Salt Lake, never stopped in Beaver, Utah, and we had to because we were running out of gas, and we stopped, and there's this ramshackle Chevron that's there. We were lucky and grateful that it was there. We looked over and there's a Tesla station, charging station that's right there. And 2 years later, we go back on a similar trip, and there's a brand new Chevron in Beaver, Utah now. So it'd be interesting to really follow the economic trail of all
Right.
that stuff, where the charging stations land. You get Flying J and all that other stuff that's taking place there too, and really to see what kind of impact you're going to have on some of those smaller municipalities that are throughout,
Absolutely.
along that electric trail.
Yeah, and one of the things that they're trying to figure out right now is the lifespan of the battery,
Right.
the electric battery, and how far these trucks can go, which is then
Yeah.
impacting real estate. So when you think about
Wow.
transport, you know, the orientated development that comes around how far a truck can go and the lifespan of the battery, and then the next step and the next step. So
Okay.
it's going to impact not just the utilities, but real estate, and then all the other amenities
Yeah.
And then recycle.
and recycling. Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, it's a big mind think of the impact of just changing the technology.
Right. All right. Yes. Good. Great. Oh, I did.
We
Okay.
interrupted you.
So I did want to talk a little bit about like how do we have adaptable infrastructure? And again, as a planner, like 5 years ago, I would never use those two words together because that's not what planners do. We put it in the ground, and for fairness sake, and for the level of service, and for all this stuff, it just stays the same. And that is starting to shift quite a bit. One of the things I am starting to see is bring up. There are companies now that will actually sell some of these improvements for your rights of way, portable bike racks. So if you have events, or if you have a main street or a farmer's market, and you just need to bring it in 2 days a week or 1 day a week, things of that nature. Parklets you can buy out of the box for $12,000, and even these planters for a segregated bike lane where you don't have to do the whole thing, but if you strategically put them along the way, it can become a lot safer. Again, these are movable as well, so maybe you only do it a couple of times a week, and maybe someday they'll be autonomous, and so they'll just move themselves after rush hour. And so really what we're starting to see is this progression of first you do a demonstration where maybe you put out hay bales or something like that to test a roundabout or a bulb out or a pedestrian improvement, and then you make it a little more sturdy, and then you make it even more sturdy, and it becomes part of the landscape. And what that does, fights over streetscape are real. It's a very emotional thing for lots of people. But I think it's also like scooters are kind of changing the conversation about what is safe infrastructure. Whose job is it? These are very important questions. And with autonomous, like a lot of them, they have to have actually the stripe has to be maintained so the car can see it. Well, who pays for that? How do we pay for that? These are all these new kind of questions. I think I'm going to end this talk on more questions than answers. And it's going to be with things like tactical urbanism. One of the things we've also learned is if you're going to do stuff like this, make it pretty. A lot of these are kind of stripy, ugly. And one of my best and favorite examples came from Los Angeles. They had pop-up mango. This isn't it. But they made a street festival to test improvements to the street. And at the end of the day, they found out the thing the neighborhood said is we under no circumstance will accept a roundabout to slow traffic. And at the end of the day, once they put it in and had a party around it, the drivers loved it, and the walkers loved it and things like that. And so again, a lot of this isn't technology, but it's landscaping materials and a new idea and an appreciation for pushback and a bigger appreciation to make it a party. So I'll just leave you sort of sum it all up of projects. First, is it a good idea? Make sure you're ready regulatory wise. Get your goals and partners in place. Make sure you have funding, especially for marketing. That was a common theme. Potential disruptions, what could go right, what could go wrong. Anticipate what could happen and work with your providers on it. And then make sure you close it out well. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's a pilot project. So thank you.
Thank you.